Welcome to a very interesting, fascinating, amazing episode of Lessons from Last Time, and very different because on this episode, I have a completely different co-host. So Allison, who works here at the Knowledge Cube, has been here almost a year, is actually going to interview or help me as my co-host interview this amazing woman. Why don't you tell us, because you've been friends for a very long time.
Yes, this beautiful person here is Kristy Laschober. We have been friends for a long time, but she is one of the most incredible, amazing, deep, all the words, friend I've ever experienced in my life. You are a unique
Wow.
soul. She is an author. She is a speaker. She is a world changer. She has passed Senate bill. Did I say it right
Yep.
this time? You are just incredible. You are attractive to all people. You have a million friends, just like Ken, all around the country because you are magnetic and loving and you care so much about people. So this is going to be my favorite conversation because I love to share all of the things of Kristy, and we get to do that here for our audience. So I'm very excited.
Thank you.
That was the best introduction ever.
Right.
Solid work, Allison.
Thanks.
I'm super happy to be here. It's really great to see you. I came in from New Orleans just the day before yesterday. And yeah, I moved to Ashland, Oregon I was in California. Do you want me to just talk about that?
No, I'm going to dive in.
Oh,
so
okay.
no, so you met
So I met
Allison when
Allison.
you moved there,
Yes, when
We're
I
gonna-
moved to Ashland.
and we're going to come back to Ashland
Okay.
because I want to dig to get there. But you and I met in New Orleans when Allison said, "Hey, Ken, you're going to New Orleans. Want to meet my friend?" And I was like, "Absolutely."
Yeah.
Like I always say
That
yes
was
to those
awesome.
things.
Yeah.
And so I show up knowing very little at happy hour, and then it was one of my favorite conversations I've had all of last year. It was, in fact, it was like the highlight of that trip. That really was.
What a treat.
But you were
Thank
competing against me watching a guy pull a gun, and like
Yeah,
there's some other
yeah,
things
yeah.
going on that week. So
Welcome to New Orleans.
yeah.
yeah, it was.
That's right.
That was the most scared I've never actually been scared in a physical environment in a long time, and that was the first time when I witnessed what I saw there. Was a little wild, but
And
but
I've never seen that.
I know
I've
you're
never
not looking in the right places.
And
Okay.
that's a lot coming from you since you like that energy and that wildlife.
Oh,
You guys
yeah.
are both into your gangster rap. Both
Yeah,
of you
totally.
are.
Yeah,
So I'm
no, I
surprised
talk a
anything
good game, but
surprised
I
you.
haven't lived I came from the Bay Area, so back then it was more normal. But yeah, it just blew my mind. Like, and then I got your book, which thank you. We got to go to a book signing that you were doing in
was
New Orleans,
great.
and that was amazing.
That was fun.
And then I got your book and I started to read it, and I realized it's not a book that you can just sit down and read and be done with.
Right.
It's an investment that you're making in yourself to actually, it'll be the first book that I actually answer the questions at the end of the chapter, because that's the bulk of the work, right?
Yeah, it is. I love that.
I don't. Like anytime I read a
Most
book and
people
it's like,
don't.
here's 3 questions. And I'm like, what's the next page? Like, I'm just kind of getting
Right.
through the book.
Yeah.
But I literally read the first chapter, and then I got to the first part where I have to answer some questions, and I went, oh, I want to respect this. Like, this is not normal. This is deep work that I'm going to do,
Oh, neat.
different than a few quick questions. It's like you're asking some very, earth-shaking questions, for me at least, where
Mhm.
I need to use a journal
Right.
instead of just, writing in a book. I'm going to open my journal and just write it all out, which I appreciate that you did that, because it means a lot that you've created something that will make a difference, instead of creating something that people can read and be like, that's really cool, and maybe recommend to a friend. The work that can be done with this is almost therapeutic.
Yes.
And
And that
you-
was the intent.
And you did a great job setting the stage and making it very clear. Like, I could imagine myself in the situation, although I've heard the stories before, but you were very clear on it's your story. You lived this, you walked these paths, these stories that happen. And for me, what got me in that book was not enough detail because of the way you were writing the book. But I'm like,
Right.
tell more. There's
Right.
so much more depth and broadness to those stories
There
and what you
is.
emotionally had to go through. And it's a page turner for that reason. So I can see why it's hard to stop and answer the questions, because
Right.
it is a page turner to hear your story.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I always say to read through it maybe and then come back and answer the questions. And those that say they answer in their head, and I'm like, okay, let me challenge you to do it like pen to paper, and then they send me a message. They're like, oh my God, it was so different, like when I wrote instead of doing it in my head, because that's more heady versus the heart.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are like me, where in my head I kind of think those very, very like face level, like, or
Right.
not very deep thoughts. as soon as I start typing, I start realizing what's really in my head. So I have to get the stuff out of my head onto paper, and then it expands.
Right.
So it is
Yeah,
important that
it
people don't
is.
just think it and go, yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah.
It just doesn't do service to the book if you do that.
Yeah.
So
Thank
let's,
you.
I would say if you're with Kristy and these questions come up and she asks you a question and you give that surface answer,
oh, yeah.
she's going to look at you and she's going to push and she's going to be like, no, tell me more really. And she'll push and push and push until all of a sudden all you see is inside of yourself, and it's uncomfortable and it's not fun, but it's the love and the care that you have for people is why you don't just take face value answers even with people you don't know super well.
Yeah, I know. I don't.
You don't.
I do that to
you push
everybody.
and that's we can get
Yeah.
into that later or now, but you don't allow that for yourself anymore. You don't just let surface value happen. You always want to grow. You always want to get deeper, and you want that for everybody around you. And so you don't take surface for an answer.
Yeah, and I think it's because I believed by doing the work myself, I believe that we each have this amazing person, this amazing authentic self that it's hard to tap into based on conditions and environment. So I've been able to tap into that through extraordinary, pain and circumstances. So I got to see like the light or that like amazing gift that comes from that. So it's not, so that's really the only reason is because I want people to like get to that core of themselves to be like, now go be however you are, instead of trying to be that way for somebody else, which we're always so good at.
Yeah. You're one of the few people that when I met you, I'm like, oh, dang, she can see my soul. Like there's certain
Really?
people, yeah, there's certain people you're like, oh, wow, Daniel
really-
Harkavy, Bill Hart. Like there's just certain people in life that you just go, all right, I can't
Yeah.
BS this person. Like they can see through me. And a lot of that comes from your experience. So I want to
Right.
start you've had quite a life. And now you're living the most amazing life. I mean, just doing all the awesome things.
Pretty cool.
And I want you to break down just that beginning of life for you. So talk us through how you like entered the world as a young person.
So I was born in 1965 in California, and my parents were young. I was a first child, and I was born with what they used to call birth defects, so I had different things wrong with my body, which required me to have many operations. The first one, like when I was 10 hours old, from what I was told. And so having operations, being in the hospital was just kind of part of my childhood into my teenage years, into my young adult years, maybe over 40 operations, and sometimes in there for like three months at a time. And so I learned that I can kind of numb out and not feel all the pain and the feelings by the bunch of Demerol and Dilaudid and morphine that was always there for me at all times. And so I pretty much learned how to manage emotions with that, and I loved it. I mean, it made me feel euphoric. It made me feel like everything's going to be okay. So when, family members, you have you're 21, 22, and you have this child that's, you're trying to keep alive, that's in the hospital, there's a lot of pain, I'm sure, and fear, and a father who's just trying to work and, start a business and all of that, they have their fears, and I just watched it all, and I'm more of a chill person anyway, so it's like, just give me a little bit more of that, and I think there was one time I remember, because I was in Children's Hospital, and I remember always wanting the room that faced there was a Bank of America building that had a clock. And so I always wanted that because I had no watch and there were no watches in the room, but I always knew when I could get my shot every 4 hours.
Wow.
And I remember thinking, I'm young, so I don't know anything about addiction. And I remember thinking, wow, that's so weird that my body wakes up at like 3 hours and 55 minutes, even in the middle of the
Whoa.
night when I didn't even need it. I thought that's so strange. I remember thinking that, but then I would call the nurse, she would get my shot, and that's the way it went.
Wow.
And at the same time, I was a normal kid in regard to like growing up at the beach, was in the water all the time, surf, skied, went to school. I would be in school, then I'd have to be pulled out, and going back and forth. I was smart, so I got good grades, and that was just my life.
How did you keep friendships during that time if you're going to be disappearing for a while and there's no cell phones you can contact people on? And
There was Pac-Man at one point. I remember I was a good Pac-Man. That was like the extent of the video games.
yeah.
I think I don't know how. I know my father was really good at, like, especially if I was in Los Angeles, he would like bring kids up and have pizza parties and try to have them around and get a VHS back then to watch movies, things like that.
Well, in your tendency, she's an Enneagram 7 like you are.
Oh,
that's the
So
best. That's the best
she's
one.
super
Is it?
spontaneous, very social. She's looking for the next fun thing. She wants the fun experience, which is why I wanted you to meet her in New Orleans because you guys remind me a lot of each other. So for her, she makes friends everywhere she goes to this day. Everywhere she goes, people love
I
Kristy
love
and they
people.
gravitate to her. So that's, I'm sure that began even when you were young.
Yeah, and I stayed in the same place up until 8th grade. So I had the same friends from kindergarten, preschool on, and then I moved to Laguna in 8th grade, which I was excited to do that. I thought, that's probably more of my adventure. So I'm like, I can't wait. And I didn't even think about like I'd have no friends and you're going into 8th grade, with the mean girls. And I didn't really have any mean girls or anything then, but I experienced the mean girls there and slowly became friends with people that I'm still friends with now.
Oh, wow.
hmm
Wow. So
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
transfer up from, where were you before Laguna?
I was in Fountain Valley,
Okay.
Huntington Beach area.
Gotcha.
hmm
So you move over to Laguna. Now, are you making new friends? Were you able to keep the old ones as well?
I still have some of the old friends.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a few
Yeah.
old friends. I still
Yeah.
went to the dances and stuff because
Uh-huh.
I didn't really have any friends in Laguna. Yeah.
So you start building friends. You're still in and out of treatments, just different things that you went in for. Were you looking forward to some of those? Were you like, hey, at least I'll feel good? Or were they like, it's bad and the only good thing there is,
Every once in a while, I remember thinking, well, I'll probably be like, if I gain weight, this is just truth. I'd be like, oh, I'll probably be in the hospital next month for something. So I'll lose like 10 pounds.
Oh my
I remember,
gosh.
when you're in Lagoon,
Wow.
you're skinny. You have to be skinny at the beach. But yeah, I remember thinking that. I haven't thought
Wow.
about that in a
Silver
long time.
lining.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, because I was always, I mean, that's just kind of my personality anyway, trying, unless maybe I was, that could be a condition that I learned to try to look at the good parts. Or, if I go in for an operation, I would be like, well, I know in 3 weeks I'll feel better. So I'd always try to get to that point. But again, I learned not to really tap into my real emotions. I remember thinking like kids because at the time there were rooms that the kids were like 3 and 4 in a room, maybe 6. And so I would watch them get like angry and cry and like bite the nurses. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like I was appalled. Like that is so beneath me. But I would be nice and make sure all the nurses and the doctors liked me and they would give me dolls. But I also knew I needed them for, anything. But and I was not in touch with any of those real emotions. Was probably fear and all that.
So you're naturally a friend maker.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned the hospital, you made friends, you've got a new school, you're making friends still.
Yeah.
You still kept the old friends, you're a collector of friends.
Yeah.
We're very similar.
Yeah.
And so everything seems to be going well, even though you've got all these struggles, you're making your way through, you're finding the best, you're looking for the silver lining around everything.
Right.
When does everything kind of turn the wrong way?
Well, every time I left the hospital, I was always given a lot of Vicodin or Percocet and those. So I pretty much, that was just my life, hand in hand. I go in, get Demerol, Dilaudid, whatever they gave me. A lot of times I didn't really need it. I did after surgeries immediately, but this is for kidneys and colon and heart, that's kind of stuff. And but then I would take it before I went out at night and say, oh, let me just take a couple pills. Because I would always like, oh, I need to change the way I feel. If I'm not feeling, great, then I better take a few pills. It was just so natural for me to do that. And then but that was just part of my life. I would go out with pills and, again, we would party, what we would say party. And, I was adventurous at the time. We would just go to Mexico, hop on a plane, go to Tijuana and do all that stuff. And I think also doctors that would say, oh, you can't do this, or this is not good for you, or you shouldn't do this, or don't go to the beach with your stitches. And I'd be like, okay, that's just a suggestion probably. And that was maybe my more rebel spirit trying to get control of something, some kind of power. But I ended up getting married, but I would still use at the time. And he became a police officer. And at one point after we were married, I got pulled over by his sergeant. I was going to pick up my sister, actually, her family from the airport in Los Angeles. And I was excited. So pills was like, it was part of what I did. And I took too many, I guess, or it just hit me in a way that made his sergeant pull me over. I got pulled over not far from my house, and he knew my name because our last name Laschober, and he took me home. And then I knew, I'm like, oh shit, I got to do something about this. This is a problem. I felt bad because it was with his boss, which was terrible. I'd never wanted to do that. I was so embarrassed. I felt so bad for him. So I went to rehab, and for really the first time learned all about that.
How old were you then?
Oh, it was 98. So I was 33?
Okay.
How did he respond to you when that happened? His wife, and he's a police officer.
He was just, I think, like me, knew that we'd have to do something because a lot of people made excuses for me because I didn't look like I was sickly, but yet I was doing all this stuff and still had all these health problems to manage. So people made kind of excuses, but it was like, I think we both just knew, okay, you need to go. And yeah, I'll go. So it wasn't any big, I don't think any big riled up.
I'm just curious, when you go to rehab for something like that, yet you still have medical things that are going to happen. So you have a need for this thing, but this thing is the thing that's the problem.
Right.
So how do they even deal with that?
You just give, like, when you get out, you give, if you have any pills or whatever, you give to a family member. That's what I would do. But looking back now, I realize that was all just masking and numbing and all the things that you need when you're not dealing with any of your stuff.
How could you have dealt, looking back, was there a healthier way? Obviously there is a healthier way to deal with it, but do you have ideas of like, what if I would have done this?
Probably, which they have that now for kids, which I love. It's called children's advocate. There's another name, life specialist or something. And they go in there and say, how are you feeling? I don't know. It'd be interesting to see if I would say, who cares how I'm feeling? I'm not sure how I would have responded, but to say, like, how are you? Like, this is probably so scary. But I did have lovely people in my life, lots of cousins and stuff. But I think I felt so bad for my family. So it's like I would be wheeled, into the operating room, if you've ever been wheeled into an operating room, and your family can walk with you to a certain point. And I was always like, couldn't wait to get to that door so they could leave me so I could cry.
Oh my gosh.
And that made me, if my dad knew that, he's not alive now, but if he knew that, he would be devastated.
Wow.
So I just took on that. So I think it's a perfect storm. It's not just like, parents doing this. It's like not acknowledging, getting through fear, all of that, and personality is a perfect storm.
So you had guilt over
So
this.
much guilt. I still do a little, even though I know it's not real, but that's the main.
Wow.
Yeah, that's, I think, the main emotion I had.
So then you had a period of somewhat sobriety, a long stretch.
10 years.
Yeah,
Oh,
a long
wow.
stretch. And
it was new to me. I'm like, wow, this is cool. You can have feelings. You can talk about spirituality. This, I could hear birds chirping because I wasn't numbed out. I mean,
Oh
I
my
used to,
gosh.
they would give me 300 dilaudid every 2 weeks, and I would sell shoes at Nordstrom. I was like regular life.
Wow.
And so I stopped all of that, and it was very interesting. But I also realized when you're married to somebody who's used to that, it didn't, like, when you're your own person all of a sudden, it was hard in a marriage.
Wow, you don't even think about that. That when somebody's got a demon they're fighting, you almost get so used to that demon that your relationship becomes
And you have guilt, so you acquiesce to them often.
right.
Now I'm like, I don't want to do that, or that doesn't feel
Oh, because
right.
you had guilt, and so I
Yeah.
get it. So you were being somebody that you weren't, and
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't know that, but yes. And it was
Wow.
subtle, but it was enough, for him to have an affair.
Oh wow.
what was the next wrong turn
The next
after your 10 years?
Oh, so the next wrong turn was, even though I was sober, I wasn't really talking about my heavy emotions. Like all of a sudden I had bam, bam, bam. I had my father passed away of cancer. My husband had an affair. We were adopting. We were in the middle of adopting because I
Oh,
couldn't have
wow.
children. So that was a big deal. We had done all the things, looking at the books, doing all of that. And then he had an affair. So I ended up going into the hospital for a kidney issue, and I was by myself. And the nurse like, "Oh, Kristen, I'll get you a shot." And I was like, "Oh, dang. Sounds so good. I need some relief." Don't
Wow.
you know all this stuff that's happening, and I'm not, and I'm having emotions that I still feel like I should be stronger. I should manage it. I should all the things I didn't really talk about because I was still kind of my own private island. I didn't share the way I share now because I couldn't even really make sense of who I was, or now I understand so much more, but at the time I couldn't really make sense of stuff. So I said, "You know what? Yes, I'll take a shot." And so at the time I knew, I was like, "Man, this is not going to go
You
good."
were opening a door. You're like,
Yeah, I knew it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I knew it. And I was in the same hospital that my father was in for a while before he passed away. And so I just, I said yes. And I got the shot, and I remember every little tiny feeling that I had. I was like, "Oh, finally relief. This is like
Wow.
old school relief." And I was seeing someone at the time who I was friends with before, and he was excited that I wasn't with my husband anymore. So we started to go out, and he had relapsed on methamphetamine. He was in Palm Springs, and he called and he said, "Hey, Chris," and he didn't even know I was in the hospital. "I need help. Can you get me out? I got to get out of here." And so I said, "Yeah, I can help you." Got out, and they gave me a huge bottle of Vicodin.
Oh my gosh.
And so I remember being on the freeway. I got some, sounds crazy. I went to Thrifty. I got some chocolate malted crunch. Love that ice cream.
That's
Had
the
that.
best ice cream ever.
Yes.
That has been my favorite ice cream since I found Thrifty. We could walk to a Thrifty.
Because I had the big tub. I'm like, here, I got some Vicodin,
Oh
going
my
to Palm
gosh.
Springs. Then I
Wait,
can
you have to
deal with
pause for a
everything.
second because chocolate malted crunch. I'm in that world in my head. I had a friend give me 4.5 gallons of chocolate malted crunch every Christmas for my birthday. That's my birthday on Christmas. And
That's
it was like our thing because it's
crazy.
so good.
It is so good. I just got
They're
a
gone
huge
now, aren't
spoon.
they?
And I
Oh,
was
have you
like,
ever had this?
No.
"Oh, you
It's
never."
the most epic
It
ice
is the
cream of all
best.
time.
And you
I
get it for
can't.
like $2 or
Yeah.
something.
Oh my
Awesome.
gosh.
At
Just a
Thrifty's.
big spoon at Thrifty.
I
Okay.
haven't told that
Anyways.
So you
story in a
can picture her
long
driving down
time.
the freeway.
Of course I
just
can.
Now that you
Yeah,
know what she's
absolutely.
eating.
Palm Springs.
Now I'm
Yes.
jealous. Yeah.
I have the bathing suit and packed some stuff up, and I went right to like an off switch. Like, let's not think about what's happening to you right now. Let's just go to Palm Springs. Let's get some chocolate malted crunch. I'll take him there. We'll be fine. And then I picked him up.
So you're trying to help a friend,
Yeah, someone who I was dating.
which had he called 2 weeks prior and said, "I need help. I need to get out."
I would have not taken his call.
Right.
Yeah. And so I picked him up, took him to a hotel, and then the thought said, "Well, Kristy, if you try this, this will stop," which I knew it would. If you stop this, it'll stop the cycle of this opioid addiction. It'll stop that process, and you won't get addicted to this. I mean,
If you try meth, it
Yeah.
will stop you from having to be dependent on opioids.
yeah, it would, which it did. It cut that. It cut.
Solve the
I
problem.
don't know if it's a neuro whatever, but it cut the craving.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm like, well, for sure I won't get addicted to this.
Who gets addicted
And
to
I
meth?
had a wardrobe styling business for 10 years while I was sober. I loved it. I had lots of clients all through like LA, San Francisco, San Diego, Palm Springs. So I had a great business. I was doing great except for the emotional things that were going on in my life. And so I picked him up, went back. I said, "Let me try some of this. What is this?" Got some, went back with him. He didn't even know it for a little while. And that did stop that. But then it started this craving, secret, I can't do this and have my business. And then guilt, that guilt word, and the shame, because I love my clients and I love this job. And but I couldn't do both. So I stuck with doing the meth.
Wow. So with addiction, from what I understand, it gets you, it becomes like, oh yeah, well, that's who I am. I'm the person that's addicted to this thing, or I'm the person who does this thing. Like it starts messing with your identity, right? So you found an old friend that you're like, oh, that's right. There's that side of me, or that's kind of who I was before. I can hold on to that now, right?
For me, it was a little bit different because I'd never felt like I was that person. I was this other person that had this issue that I needed to get to either solve, or I didn't identify with that. The other person that I was with did.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think for me, if I stopped that and asked for help, because I have lots of people that I could ask for help, I would have had to face the death of my father, the divorce, the adoption. Then I'd have to like look at my clients. Then I would have nothing to numb, and I would just have to face all that. And no one really is going to understand me in my mind. Like no one's really going to understand all the stuff that I'm going through, because I never talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was just more, if I stop this, then I got to face all this stuff, and I'm not willing to. And let's just go to Palm Springs, and someone said, hey, you can buy a little bit more, and then that will be free. And then I have this guy, and you could just send
Oh
it
my
to.
gosh.
And the person that I was with, he's, college graduate. He's not somebody that's a drug dealer in any capacity. And then when I told him that I did it, he was so angry. He was like screaming at me. I've never seen anyone so angry. He was like snot crying, like, what did you do? Like, this is the devil. And I'd be like, so dramatic. It's not that,
Oh my gosh.
but he was right. And he's like, you're the light, Kristy. You're supposed to be the light. He was so angry. And then it took a little bit. Then let's buy a little bit extra,
Isn't that interesting that he knew you so well and he thought maybe you would be immune to the effects that he was
I think
feeling
so,
from the drug?
for
And he
sure.
was leaning on you. He called you for support and for help, thinking that maybe you were stronger or immune to that
I wouldn't have answered the call if I wasn't already,
But with your history, it kind of makes sense that it might be a struggle for you. It's interesting that he went down that road.
I don't think he ever knew me in that light. He only knew me as someone who
wasn't
successful
in that world.
and well.
How long was that relationship before it crashed?
Like what crash?
There was
several crashes.
The Las Vegas moment.
Oh yeah, that was probably 5. Oh gosh, that was maybe 7 years.
Wow.
Do you want to briefly share that?
Well, yeah. So I want to know. So
So then we
clarify
said,
for this.
so we
They
bought a
said
little,
if
and
you could have some for free, or you
Yeah.
could have some for low price if you just delivered this other.
well, no, it
or-
was like you can buy this much
Uh-huh.
for this price. You can buy a
Mhm.
little bit for this price. You can buy larger amount for this littler price, and then you could sell that, and then this part's free.
Right.
So the more you buy, the more free you have.
And you're an entrepreneur.
And I'm an entrepreneur.
I mean, you
And
ran
that
your
was
own
like-
business. You're like, this is business.
Yes, I even had a spreadsheet. That's what got me in
Yeah.
trouble.
I tell that
no.
story when I tell people about your story. I'm like, she had a spreadsheet.
See, me hating
That's-
spreadsheets is a
that's
real
what
thing.
got
It's
her.
healthy.
yeah, because so that's what we did.
Transferable skills.
Transferable skills.
You're
And
good
so
at
in my
that.
mind, I have an off switch that can serve me really well when I'm doing scary things for good. I can show up here, I can speak to a bunch of people, I can speak about my story, I can do that. But when used for bad, it can off switch. I can, buy drugs from the Mexican mafia.
Oh my
and
gosh.
reprimand them for being late.
I feel like we really took a jump there. So in one moment, you're like, there's this person I could buy from, and then I could sell some. So your selling of some
It just got
actually ended up
bigger.
being pretty big, pretty profitable, I imagine.
Mhm.
Okay. So this is happening. You're back in Laguna at this point?
Back and forth,
Okay.
Laguna, San Clemente, Palm Springs mainly.
And you have a network of people that are buying?
very small, but a very small network, but large quantities.
Are they selling again? Are there
Yeah.
multiple layers in this?
Hmm
Wow.
And they didn't live here. but
So
yeah,
so these people are all over, and you're
it's just
now,
a couple. It's
right?
just a few people.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're the middleman, if you will, on this
Same
ring
here.
or this.
Yeah, and there was one point that I was gonna ship it, and there had to be a certain cutoff time, and the people that were coming in from Mexico was late. And as an entrepreneur kind of mindset, you're not supposed to be late. So I had said, hey, I gotta talk to you. You can't be late. All the things that you say to somebody. And the guy I was with was looking at me like, what are you doing? And and the guy has, what was his, oh, I won't say his name, but he said to me, "Come here, Kristy," and he said, I don't know if you realize this, but like for the amount of money that's here and the amount of product that's here, I will never tell you when I'm going to be on time. You will never know because people get killed every day for this. And for some reason, that like snapped me into reality, and I was like shaken. It still kind of shakes me a little bit when thinking about that. Like, what are you doing, Kristy? Like, you are not selling shoes.
In your head, you're selling widgets.
Yeah.
You're just buying widgets and selling widgets.
Right.
It doesn't matter what that
exactly.
widget is.
And I was using the whole time. So you're not of your right sound mind. So,
Wow. So you yell at the Mexican mafia as you're doing a deal. This obviously is bigger than you ever expected it to be. It's now feels like out of control.
yeah.
How does that end?
It ends because there was somebody that I sold to in Connecticut. I'd never been there, never met the person. And at one point, there was something kind of fishy in San Clemente that seemed like someone was in the neighborhood. There was a guy who was on the phone. He looked a little raggedy, and he was pushing a baby carriage, but he was staring at the house. And I was like, it feels weird. And so I went out there and followed him in the car. And I was like, I hope there's a baby in that baby carriage. And there wasn't. There was just papers. And he was staring at me, and I was looking at him. And then we went back to the house, and then we had.
There's a picture of you in the baby carriage.
yeah, right. No, it was. I don't know what was in there, but and then we had tickets actually to the CES show in Las Vegas. So we're like, let's go to Las Vegas, and we made sure nothing was anywhere, and went to Las Vegas. And then we ended up getting there was a lot of noise in the hallway that I thought maybe was the maids being super loud, but it was the feds, and they came in and busted down the door. At the same time, it was a priest that was in Connecticut, a Catholic priest, and he also got stopped at the plane on his way to London, and some other people, and everyone got arrested.
Wasn't it? He had a nickname, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Did she tell you that?
The media called him Monsignor Meth.
Oh my gosh.
It's terrible.
So you're the supplier for Monsignor Meth. You end up, they kick in your door in Vegas, and you're now
on the floor, hands behind my back. Remember, I was married to a police officer. I used to like bring him lunch in the jails.
right.
So now here I am. I've never been in trouble before. My partner was right there too, and I was like, "Oh, that we're not getting out of this." And so there was nothing in the hotel room. But that was my journey through federal prison and being sentenced to 60 months in federal prison.
Wow. What was the moment where you had the wake up? I mean, was it right there on the floor? Was it when you were getting booked in? When did you go, oh, this is really, really, really
On
real?
the floor.
Okay. And then you're like, I've lost my freedom.
Yes.
You are watching this podcast and you're in the mortgage industry and you haven't checked out the Knowledge Coop, you definitely need to dive into the Knowledge Coop. In there, you will find content and community that will help you grow as an individual by learning everything there is to know about the mortgage industry. If you think you know everything, just dive in and take some classes because there's always something more you can learn. To be successful in this business, you've got to continually learn. In addition, if you're a company and you want to teach your people in your own environment, we've got that in the Knowledge Coop Enterprise Services. So reach out to us, check out knowledgecoop.com. Definitely join Coop Plus. Let's get back to the podcast.
Could you share the story of when the lawyer talked to you about telling the truth? Because that, I feel like, is a huge pivotal moment in your kind of being honest with yourself.
Right. So I had no experience with a lawyer. I've never had a lawyer. I've never, I had no experience with any of it, which a lot of people who've never been arrested are thrown into this vicious world of criminal legal system, and you don't know what's going on. And so anyway, I had a public defender, and he basically kept saying that you need to tell on everybody. If you don't, someone's going to tell. It's like, Kristy, everybody tells. The mother tells on the son tells on the brother.
That's like the movies. That's a total movie.
Yeah, he said
interrogation.
everybody tells. And I
Right.
said, well, the person I was with, he's not going to like tell on me, like make up stuff or whatever to get me time. He goes, they all tell, Kristy, like, don't be stupid. And so that was hard for me. And this was probably 3 months later. I had got taken through Las Vegas to Oklahoma and Connecticut and Rhode Island, like on Con Air. There's a Con Air. And so that's another kind of crazy time. But the attorney said, you got to tell. And so I decided not to tell. There was a girl, I wish I could remember who she was in the prison. And I was like, I don't know, of course your family wants you to tell because they don't want you to get the 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I was still like, that does not sound right. That's, because it's not like I stepped into this and I had no idea and I'm getting, in trouble, but I was part of it and I'm not going to, tell on somebody and make me seem like I didn't do anything. And anyway, so I decided I'm not going to, the girl said, Kristy, when you close your eyes at night, whatever you're comfortable with doing, that's what you do no matter what anyone else says.
Mm.
That was the first time I was like, oh, man, I get to decide.
Mm.
Okay, I'm not telling. And no one told. So he said that
Right.
was the first time. And I think it's because that was not our career. We just
Mhm.
stumbled on that. And, we still had a lot of fondness for each other. Even the priest didn't tell. No one, telling meaning like we didn't say we didn't have a part of it and they all did. And so there was a one point where we had to give I think it was called a proffer. And so the prosecution comes in and asks exactly what happened. So you tell what happened. And so my attorney, and this is I think what Allison's talking about, said, okay, the prosecution wants to talk to you again. Now, I just need to tell you that you have to be honest no matter what. You have to be honest about every single thing, even stuff you didn't get charged for. You have to
Oh.
be honest. And you have to be. He goes, do you see me? I look in my eyes. Yes. And he goes, okay. Also, if you're honest, you could get 20 years.
Oh, that's a horrible. Wow.
So here you are in the crossroads. And again, this was probably maybe 3 months, 4 at the most at this time. No drugs in your system,
Mhm.
all, making sense, your family, you're like horrified of where you are and, the pain you're causing your family. And I wrestled with that for a while. Like, what am I going to do? At this point, I was like, I I don't like to talk about the fact that, oh, I found Jesus in jail. It's not like that, but it's like I needed to breathe. So like if there was a Bible there and I could read some chapters and Psalms to make me feel like I'm a
Mhm.
human and I'm going to be okay, then that's what worked for me.
Mhm.
And so I read and I'd made the decision on my way there that I'm just going to be honest, because
Mhm.
if I'm not, then I'm still this other person that I know is not really me. And so I walked in, we sat down, he asked me the same questions that he had already asked me. And you see my attorney looking at me like, I can't tell you what to do, but I told you,
Mhm.
the ramifications. And so he said, so he asked me all the same questions and then I'm ready for whatever he's going to say. And he said, okay, thank you, we're done. And my attorney like yanked me the hell out of there. And he's like, oh my God, he said a lot of bad words. And he said, I can't believe it. I can't believe, he goes, I can't believe they didn't ask you that stuff. And so I knew right then that was my first moment of like, wow, you mean I can take a risk and I can be honest.
Mm.
And that was kind of the first time that I trusted, you know, the spiritual being or higher power or the universe, however you want to call it, that something bigger than me that I can depend on to have my best interest at heart, whatever that would be.
And in the spirit of this title of this podcast, Lessons from Last Time, in your story, that's one of my favorite stories, which is why I always want you to share it, because that was one of your first huge
The
lessons
huge.
that you continue with everybody around you to talk about that trust and to talk about something bigger than yourself and believing that honesty will come back around and trust will come back around if you can follow that and the
Yes.
bravery that takes.
And sometimes it doesn't work out well.
Mm.
When I went to they had me go to Salvation Army for a little while as a pretrial, and my house was selling. I had my house short sale because I
Mhm.
couldn't make the payments. I've had it for 15 years, and I wouldn't expect my family to make my mortgage payments. I didn't know how long I was going to be in there and stuff. And then the person I was with was at another Salvation Army, and he brought drugs.
Oh my gosh.
And so I used, and they kicked me. They said, if you're honest with me, we'll help you. So I said, okay, I'm this honest person. They said, okay, thank you. They kicked my ass out.
We'll help you
They
pack your
kicked me out.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll
They
help you
didn't-
get
right,
out.
They didn't specify how that help was going to look.
Exactly.
Right.
So that's the lessons from last time, that, being honest is being integrity with yourself.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I never lived that way because I think I was just managing my health journey, managing people, managing my family, I'll do what needs to be done to get through.
Mhm.
But I never knew I could have this integrity no matter what
Wow.
that I have now.
So that kicks in. You're feeling way better about being honest with yourself and honest with other people. You didn't get 20 years.
5.
So you got 5 years. You go in. What's your feeling just when you look around in there? You know who you are. You know what you've been through. You meet other people, and most of us only know what we've seen on TV or movies.
Yeah.
I've been to San Quentin. I've been inside prisons visiting family. But most people have not even done that, right?
Right.
And so for you, you walk in, you see people. What's your view when you first get there?
I was afraid. Like
Mhm.
my legs were shaking. There was no off switch. I'm like, come on, kick in, kick in. It was like, we're tired.
The trusty off switch is just not working.
I need you to just experience all this. And so I was afraid, but after time, I realized that it's a place of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And even for the men, whenever we would have to go to court or something, I was on the van with the other men, and it was just usually me or other like one woman or two that were there. And I had the best conversations with these young men, and I was like, wow. And I remember getting downloaded or thinking that I wish others could experience this humanness of these people. And the day I was getting sentenced, I was like, they were so kind, like my brothers, they were like, it's going to be okay no matter what. I promise you it's going to be okay. And these are these big dudes that most people would not assume that those kind of words would come out of their mouth. So to this day, I have this super deep fondness for people that are inside or have been inside, because it's just trauma.
So pretty quickly, you didn't see them and go, "Oh gosh, I'm better. I'm better than them. Why am I here? I'm not supposed to be here." You saw them and listened and paid attention.
Yeah.
Wow.
I still said, why am I here? Like,
Right.
I knew, like, I shouldn't be here. I had opportunity. I had a loving family. Why am I here?
Wow. And you probably wanted to go back and replay a lot of things at that point.
Yeah, except I also knew that that because of how I, like, from being in the hospital, and that was my life. Like, my dad would sit there and pump the pain machine to make sure that I wouldn't have pain when I'm asleep. So like, I was just used to that. So I just, like, who I thought I was and who they said I was so off. It was so didn't match in any capacity. So that's what made me start to write and try to delve into who I was.
That's the work you started doing when you
Yeah.
were in. Okay.
Yes.
At this point, you're off drugs. You did a NA meeting in there. I have to hear this again.
Well, it's a drug program. So
Yeah.
I don't think people know this. When you're sentenced, the judge will say, you will go to a camp in California, like he understood, I think, this was my first time and my family. And he's like, you'll be at a camp in California. You'll do the RDAP program, which is a drug program. That'll get a year off. You'll really only be there 3 years. You're like trying to make it okay. But when you walk out that door, he has no say, and the BOP does whatever they want. So all of a sudden, I'm going to maximum security prison in Texas that is not a
It
camp.
doesn't feel like camp at all.
It's not
Oh
a
my
camp.
gosh.
And you're far away from your family. I was already in Rhode Island, which is the furthest you can get from California. And then the drug program in Texas, everyone kept saying, Kristy, you can't do it here. Like, they don't graduate people. And I thought, I'll do it. I need work. I know I need to do work on myself. I'm not doing drugs. I'm not having sex. That was the only two that are fighting. I don't fight. So I thought, I'll be fine, you know. But it was a really horrific experience in regard to, I realized you can't work on your trauma when you're in survival mode. And I'm determined to change that to BOP before I die. You
Wow.
can't work on your trauma and be safe in a cell when you are also with other people that are working through their trauma, but they want to graduate. So they will do whatever to you so that they can graduate. And
Oh,
we
wow.
have 32 people. All of a sudden there's 2 of you, and I don't quit. So I'll keep going. And they end up kicking me out a few weeks before I was supposed to go home. They said I was inauthentic. They said no, it said no clinical progress. And so I had to do another year.
Oh my
So it
gosh.
was a drug program that I had been involved in for several months. Like, it was painful. Like, you had to look at all your stuff, like shame, and it was not
For the
good.
first several years that you had been out,
Yeah,
anytime RDAP came up, you would get fired up,
hatred.
angry,
Mm.
cry. We hike a lot. We would be on trails and we would be so
Still makes-
loud
yeah.
because that one subject always got you. I'm curious, it's been a couple years since then. How are you today?
Now it makes me a little emotional because I remember me and you talking about it.
RDAP is the
Residential drug something program. I got so angry because I saw how they treated people. Yeah, they treated me bad, but they treated these women that had no support and were really like trying to do the right thing and trying to be, truthful with these horrific stories that happened in their life. And then they just slam them and make fun of them. And it was, I got so angry. And the lady, when she was kicking me out, she said, she called me back, and I thought, oh, she's going to change her mind. Like, I'll do whatever. Like I would say to them, I'll do whatever. And she said, thank God you couldn't have children. You would have been a terrible mother.
Oh my gosh.
Knowing that was my like sore spot. And she's like, I bet you're a terrible sister and a terrible daughter.
Oh, this is somebody who's
is
supposed to be
in
helping you through
charge.
oh my
Yes.
gosh.
So and I say that because I want people to know the kind of people that are inside the prison. So if you're trying to do work on yourself, can you imagine that being, as someone who sees a counselor, someone saying that to you now? And then I had to leave and do another year.
Oh my
And when I
gosh.
say hatred, I never knew I had hatred in my body like that, or anger. I was never an angry, really person, but that created this fire that's like, I was so mad. And yeah, now it's better because I feel, my mom's always like, you're gonna go kick her ass and you're gonna fire her. You're gonna be in charge of her. Yeah, it doesn't. I'm not gonna forgive yet. But it fueled the fire in me to share, and it fueled this path of really getting to know myself on a deep level.
Think about all the people she would have spiraled with comments like that she
That
probably
she
did.
did.
she
And
did.
a lot of times I think, I think of these different women that like said and had horrific lives,
Right.
trauma, and doing that stuff to them. Ooh. And I know the one girl that ended up staying, she was the compound drug dealer. So it's like, so you're in there for committing a crime. Most people, don't argue with the fact that I should be held accountable. But then you see this kind of stuff happen and have the drug dealer being the only one that graduates and everyone else has to do. It's so messed
Wow.
up and bizarre.
I don't want to fast forward too much because I love the story so much, but there's so much I still want you to talk about. And so what year did we meet?
2017.
Okay.
And at this point I was like, I'm not going to chair. I'm moving. Well, so the guy that I was with, he got out before me since he graduated the RDAP
Were you still
program.
connected? You still talked or wrote
A little
letters?
bit,
Or
yes, yes.
And what year is this?
This is between 2013, 2017.
Okay.
And then he got out before I did, which ended up being a blessing because I got to see him not do as well, because he still wasn't sharing anything and wasn't really taking responsibility. It was more blame, kind of victim-y.
And I bet the experience in a men's prison is so different than the experience you had.
Things he would tell me, I would be horrified.
Right.
Like they lock you, you pretty much got to fight.
Right.
Like blood all over fight.
Yeah.
In your cell. It's horrific. And he was in Brooklyn and New York.
And you said you
He's a
can't work on
little
your trauma.
white-haired dude,
Oh,
surfer guy from
wow.
San Clemente.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
can't, you said you can't work on your trauma while you're living in fear, and he was living
Mm-mm.
in fear every single day. So of
Survival.
course he couldn't work through some of those
And he
things.
graduated.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, so that's why he got out early.
Oh my
He got the
gosh.
year off and I didn't. But I did get to see him not live in a manner that I wanted to live in.
Mhm.
So I decided to relocate to Oregon, where my mom and my sister were.
Mhm.
And I didn't want to, like my heart, like getting in the airplane, going, I had to pass, the gates of Palm Springs, LA, Orange
Mm.
County, Medford, Oregon. I'm like, dang,
Wow.
I had to move there. I felt that pull, but
Yeah.
I was getting more attached to my heart versus my head. So I was listening to that small voice in my heart become louder, and I knew that that would be something good for me to do.
Wow.
And
So
that's
you
when
had
I met
grown a lot
Allison.
during that time.
Yes.
Did you go did you have any more operations or surgeries while you were in jail?
I just had kidney stones, but
Okay.
the doctors in there, and that's why they sent me to maximum security, because it's a supposed medical center.
Mhm.
But all the doctors in there are all those that are on ankle monitors.
Oh,
I
wow.
don't think everyone,
I did
the
not
ones
know
that lost
that.
their license.
Yeah. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Mhm.
Okay, so you get out, now you're like, I get to go experience the world. Was there any fear in you, like, what if I go back? Or were you just like, no, like
Tons
I've
of
got
fear.
this? Okay.
Because everyone talks about that you'll go back.
Wow.
Mhm.
Like even out the door, my
Mhm.
landscape boss, it's so hard to leave everybody too. Like you want to leave, but you feel so bad. And so, I hear them like, Laschober, you hear that last voice, they're in the
Mhm.
garden doing something. And I look back and he's like, you'll be back. Everyone that
Oh
looks
my
back comes
gosh.
back. And I didn't think I was going to come back, but I always hear that for a little tiny technical violation, things like that, depending on who your PO is.
Mhm.
And I never had a PO before, so I didn't know that they try to get you back.
Mhm. Wow.
It's money. It's a business.
It's a
What a
business,
great
yeah.
message.
Yeah, most of
See
them
you
do come.
soon.
Well, it's 70%, about up to 70%
Wow.
in 5 years go back.
70%?
70.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh.
And the person I was with went back
Mhm.
for a bit. Yeah.
So you meet Allison.
I met Allison.
Allison,
She
I
was friends
imagine,
with my
embraced you and became
sister.
your best friend quickly.
Yeah. She was my
Her
sister's
nephew and
friend.
my daughter were dating.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And so my sister, I think, had asked you, right, to say, "Oh, could you be friends with my sister?" Because
Well,
you
I
went to church.
yeah, I knew
and
a
she
few
knew I
years.
wanted to.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
knew while you were there that her sister would share with me about her sister, and so I only knew of you through that conversation. And then when you finally came to us in Oregon, she asked if I would take you to a Bible study because she knew that you were interested in God and that maybe that would be a community or a social, get you kind of acclimated to the area. And
Yeah.
I jumped
Yeah.
on that.
Hmm. Yeah, it was really the time that you feel peace. Like a lady would sing, like in the church, the gospel song, she would sing Jesus Loves Me, and you would just cry
Mm.
because it like touches, like I'm a human, touches something in you. So yeah, I want to go to church, and I think you picked me up, or my mom dropped me off, or something like
I
that.
started driving you at some point.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't drive yet.
Yeah.
Or didn't have
Oh, I didn't have a car.
vehicle or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
mentioned your mom, and I love your mom. We've now
Yeah,
gotten to
she's
hang
so
out twice.
great. Yeah.
But so did she move up? Like,
She was already
oh,
there
she was
with
already
my
there. Okay,
sister.
that's where you,
Yeah.
okay, that's
And
where
when
you
you
landed.
talk about seeing your mother when you're getting sentenced,
Oh, yeah.
it's bad.
When I first met Kristy, I knew her story and I brought her to Bible study. We were in a little small group around a table and there was maybe 8 women.
Mhm.
And they're just getting to know her. We all knew each other for years. So they're just getting to know my friend I'm bringing, who I'm just meeting. And she was quiet and didn't share her story. So I'm sitting next to her and she's answering some questions. And I'm thinking, gosh, I know so much more about her story. But it's on her it's her decision if she wants to share. And she had said, I think that first time I drove you home, like, I am not going to share my story. And I was like, okay, so I'm going to be sitting next to you knowing that this is a private, personal thing. And the very next meeting, it was meeting 2 or 3.
I couldn't take it anymore. Listening to people.
She was hearing these women, and in this Bible study, it doesn't matter if you're in a Bible study or any kind of a group or any kind of community, we are used to those back to that surface level answer, that thing that you think will get you out of the question or answer it well enough for people to go, okay. And Kristy doesn't do that well. And she heard even these women around this table not in touch with their heart and their truth.
But think they are.
Think they are. And she's like,
That's
I can't
hard for
stand
me.
it. So she just busted open and shared, right? When you did it, I didn't expect it because you said you weren't going to
I don't
do
even
it.
really remember what
Was that the first
anything.
time you shared your story?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And but I didn't even
Wow.
really share my whole story, I think. I just made I don't remember, but I remember I just
I mean,
couldn't
it was
take
something big
anymore.
enough that I was in prison and I just got
Oh,
and I
really?
just got here. And I was like, oh, there she goes.
Well, there has to be that fear of judgment, right? I mean, you have to get over that
Yeah.
massive
Oh yeah,
fear.
massive fear. Massive fear.
I'll tell you, I was in college. I was with a buddy of mine, and we were in a class, and we walk out and go to use the restroom. And there's a guy mopping the floor, and he's like, "Oh, hey man, how long you been out?" And I look at my buddy, and I'm like, "What?" And all of a sudden, I was like, "What's happening right now?" And we get out, and I could tell he's shifted because he didn't want
Yeah.
to share his story.
Mm.
And so, but I mean, it is an interesting dynamic because
Mm.
now I have to listen to him and go, okay, does this change the guy I know is the guy I know? And I love that. We traveled together. Like he was on the debate team with me and we traveled together. He's one of the greatest people I've ever met. But I noticed in my head, I went, what? Like I almost shifted to go, oh, this person's not like me, yet this person is like me.
Mhm.
Right? And his story's just an insane, like you said, trauma,
Mhm.
very
Yeah.
trauma-based story that led him to where he lost his mind one night.
Mhm.
And so I had to go, okay, well, do I want to be friends with a guy who has murdered people?
Yeah.
But he's the same guy that I've always known. It's just
Mhm.
a new piece from his history is
New
now
piece.
affecting the way I'm seeing him. I was like, I struggled with it.
Well,
And
because
then-
you're conditioned through
Right.
media and through everything,
Right.
through everything that we hear, through the newspapers, all of
Mhm.
that. And there's some truth to stuff, but yeah, I love people
Mhm.
who have murdered people, which
Mhm.
sounds
Mhm.
terrible. And I could never say that honestly without the deep knowing of who they are.
Mhm.
Well,
Yeah.
and
And
so
Allison loves people with too, right?
I have a little crush on
Yeah.
one.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
We
I know I was just with him in
I know
Washington
you sent
DC.
me
I'm like,
you sent me a photo. I was like, I love you, husband.
yeah.
So we have a podcast together that's on pause. Does that feel good when I say it's on
Yes,
pause?
please, because
It will be
everyone
back.
keeps like
Okay.
dying for us to do
I have
it.
a guest for you.
Oh, I can't wait.
So
Yeah.
we
I can't wait.
interview everybody has been are formerly incarcerated, so we hear a lot of that similar story of what it's like to get out, and the people on that podcast have opened my eyes, and I love so much that it doesn't matter what you've done. Everybody has different variables that they've
Yes.
grown up around, and if you live in a middle class suburb and you have enough money to have your basic needs met, nobody's selling drugs around you, and you go to a school and you come home to a mom and a dad, that's a very different life than a lot of people. And it breaks that judgment off of you, and you realize, well, those weren't my variables. I had a very privileged life in that sense, those weren't my variables. My aunt, my uncle, my parents, not everybody was selling drugs, and I didn't have enough food at night.
Right.
And so our guests on our show, I have utilized for different things. My daughter had a school project called David.
Yeah.
It's
so cool you can call David, who
I know.
murdered his abuser and went to
Yes.
prison. And
now
now
serves the abusers.
and now he serves those that abuse.
Wow.
Yeah, see, that's the kind of cool people.
That's
that
the
we
power
know.
that comes
and
from
call
yeah.
him and be like, hey, can you help my daughter with this project? And then I have another young friend that's facing prison time right now, and I could call Artie and be like, could you please talk to his mom? She needs help right now. And these it breaks all of that off of you, that these people, those people, it breaks that off, and you just realize we are all people that want the same thing, to be loved and heard and understood and safe. And we just have different variables that change that for little kids. And
yeah, I'm certain if I didn't grow up in the hospital with access to all that, I wouldn't have been. And maybe if my father hadn't died, there's all these ifs. In fact, I took a criminology class right when I got out because I wanted to learn, why the hell would I do that? And I realized it was just a perfect storm of environment, personality, trauma, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Just
So I
a
want to
perfect
talk about
storm.
your sharing of your story because with our kids, our kids have been through some things, and with each, I'm going to do this without crying, I promise. Although if I do, it's okay.
To cry.
It's totally okay. But our big thing with them is when you go through something difficult, the reason or the best that you can make out of that is that there is somebody down the road that you're going to meet who needs to be able to talk to somebody who's been through it and had victory through that really difficult time.
Yes.
And they've already seen it. We're like, keep your eyes open because there's going to be somebody.
I love that.
When they are, I'm going to give them your number. Like if I talk to somebody who is going through it, I'm going to pass them over to you.
Love it.
But you have to be willing to share that story,
Right.
and to keep it locked inside almost gives power to the bad side of it. Whereas to open it up gives power to it to make good out of what's been done, right?
Yes, and that's why a lot of people go back too,
Right.
because even the person that I was with has it locked down inside for guilt and
Mhm.
shame, and it is just more like a mental prison now.
Right. So you've now freed yourself. You start by telling
free myself.
in this place in Medford, you tell your story. Then you're like, do you remember like that felt good? I want to tell more people. I want to get this.
Each time I shared a little bit, just shame broke off.
Yeah.
A little shame, and then people would tell me their stuff, you know. Then I
And you start
felt
realizing you're not
I'm
the
not
only one with
alone.
things. Yeah.
And the more I hear, the more I speak, the more I have this back and forth with people, the more I realize we're all the same. We're different, but we're all the same. And I didn't know that. When you're quiet and you don't share, like I said, I was very private. I didn't know others had the same things that I did. Same feelings. So maybe different circumstances, but
Different prisons, right?
Different prisons. Yeah. And so the more you share, and that's kind of that's why I wrote the book. That's why I started to write, because I think that's the best way to connect to myself. And I think one of the biggest things is, you know, you're by yourself in a prison for those years. And then luckily, when I moved to Ashland in Oregon, I was by myself, meaning I didn't live with anyone. So it was just me and me, you know, deciding how much I was going to get to know myself and be okay with my perceived dark sides and light sides, and talk about it with friends. And even just the interaction back and forth with you and I, Allison, it healed me. Even though if you were going through stuff, me sharing and speaking aloud healed me too.
Well, and we're not going to be done at the moment, but we have to share the lesson that you taught me. The biggest one that sticks with me and I pass along to everybody is that going inside and not blaming everyone, not looking outside of yourself. I was going through a really, really hard time right after you went through a hard time. And every time I complained, I vented, I was mad about what somebody said or did or made me feel, you just would, what about you? What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do to make your world better? And go inside and deal with that. Well, but he did this, and but this was said, but can you believe? And every time you'd be like, anyway, what are you going to do about it? And it's taught me to go inside every time and be like, I can't change anybody else. I can't change however anybody else is acting or thinking or processing something. All I can do is decide, am I going to stay here? Am I going to move left? Am I going to move right? And it's all about what I'm going to do for myself.
That is so powerful.
What a gift.
Oh my gosh.
Well, I was going to have her share more of that, but that was this lesson.
That's true.
Share the thing I'm about to tell you.
I didn't mean to say that, but it was
it's good.
I've shared it with everybody. Anytime my children, my friends, my husband, anybody comes to me, I immediately go to this Kristy mode. Okay, so what are you going to do about it? Yeah, they did that. What are you going to do now?
Because that's power.
Yeah.
Oop, Jinx, you owe me Coke.
Do
they still say that?
With you?
Yeah, because that's power. And so when you have, you know, like I say, when you're alone in a cell and you want to feel better, like I'm big on, let's get to the other side fast. You know, I remember saying to Allison, this is going to hurt. This is going to hurt bad. It may even get worse, but it's going to get better faster if we look to ourselves
and feel it all. I had a sticky note on my window for 5 years.
Oh,
feel it all.
And it's not fun to feel it all. I don't even like doing that, really. But the fact that we can't change anybody, and everyone has their traumas and their stuff that, like, we're talking about all our stuff, and everyone else has that stuff. So the beautiful thing I learned just over the last several years is that we each have so much power inside us that I just gave away through guilt, gave away, learned from doctors that, you know, took my power. People took my power. People pleasing, others in your family that they have, you know, needs that are loud, then you think, oh, I better just do what they say. And I just gave that all away. And so to be able to grab it back and to shift to like have all the answers within me, that's huge. So I don't need to worry about what you're going to do or you're going to do. I can just decide on my own. Like even with the guy, I'd be like, you know what, you be you. And I get to decide if I want to be with this or around it or not. And that's power.
I used to scream at you on
You
trails.
did. You used to get so mad.
There was a lot of
I'd be
screaming
like, I
between
don't
the two of you
care.
on trails.
We're both very passionate.
Yeah, and we were walking and talking.
What were you
a
screaming about?
lot.
I would be
She
so
was
mad
so
at her
angry.
when she didn't want to. I was hurting so bad, and I had so much pain, and I wanted to share it, and she would listen, but she
I'd be
she
like,
loved me
okay.
too much to let me live in that. She loved me too much to let me blame other people. So she was like, "You got yourself here too. So how are you going to change that? How are you going to shift and get into a new space that works for you?"
I want
But I'd be like,
people,
"Shut up!
Yeah. I want people to get to this side fast because you can wallow in that. Like you can, yeah, and that's true that they did do that. He did do that. That's terrible. We'll talk about for a week. Should we talk about for like
This
2
is when I would
weeks?
yell when she would do that.
Should we do this for 2 months? Like, but let's go fast. I want you to heal. Let's get there. Okay, they did all that. Look what you did. Look what I've done. Look what everyone on the whole planet has done. We can talk about that, or we can like gain our power and say, okay, so what am I going to do about it? But a lot of times, even with women, I'll say, you have power in your body, and they say, I do. And I say, are you afraid of your power? And they say, yes, most of the time.
Wow.
We have a lot to cover that we're never going to get to in one episode, but you've done huge things since you have been out and about in the world. You graduated college.
I went back to college as an older person.
You have found yourself in front of the Senate and judges and powerful people doing what? What was your biggest? Well, you've had a lot of accomplishments, but share.
Well, when I went back to school, I had to go on Twitter for a class assignment, and someone who'd been incarcerated reached out to me through Twitter and said, hey, I see you've been incarcerated. And in school, I was sharing little bits at a time too, and met with a lot of really welcoming, good people that helped me share. And he said, hey, I just passed a law in, I think it was Washington or California, and ban the box.
Oh, yeah.
Ban the criminal history box on college applications. I see you're a scholar and you have been incarcerated. It's a cool thing to do if you want to do it. I was like, okay. Like, I had no idea what that meant. Like I said, I had to look up what 𝗟𝗶𝘁𝗲𝗿 was, Senate bill. Okay, I got that. And so we worked on that for a couple years, and we got the bill passed in Oregon. So all college applications, private and public, can't ask, because we talk about the 70% going back. As soon as somebody who's been incarcerated gets their associate's degree, it goes down to 16%.
What?
As soon as they get their bachelor's, 6%, and master's is like 0.00 something percent.
Oh my gosh.
And isn't there a statistic about their children? About
I don't know the numbers,
incarceration, but it actually changes the generational numbers.
Wow.
It's huge number. And if you look at, I have a reentry court judge who I love to death. That's the one that really got me, kindly forced me back into school. And she has the whole chart that's like, here's what it costs to incarcerate somebody in Oregon. Here's what it costs to educate somebody in Oregon. It's half the price.
Wow, really?
Yes. But they don't, I have whole things about all that. Yeah.
So you're
So I
now
work
out to
on
change
that.
all that.
Yeah. So we work on that. Yeah.
Were people getting denied college admission with
Yes.
previous convictions?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I had my first boss when I moved to Louisiana. Her name's 𝗟𝗶𝘁𝗲𝗿. She got out and checked the box, and she didn't get admitted. And then she waited a year and didn't check the box and got admitted to health science. Yeah. So, and she just ran for Senate and has done a lot of great things too.
Gosh.
So, you have these experiences, and then you use them. You fight for them.
So that first Twitter message leads you into this, like, now I'm an advocate.
Now I'm an advocate. And then I went to a conference, a national conference of higher ed in prison, and that opened a whole new world for me. Those inside don't realize how many people out here are fighting, how many advocates, and I always say, I would love you guys to come with me the next time I'm at this thing. When you are in a conference and there's a guy on the screen who, is in San Quentin getting ready to get out, and he's talking about quantum physics because Princeton came and is teaching him. I mean, it is magnificent.
Wow.
Somebody who didn't think they lived past 25 being in their neighborhood is now talking quantum physics and can't wait to get out to finish school at Princeton.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
love.
Yeah.
That's beauty. That's how we're supposed to heal the world.
Right.
You have been on this really steep trajectory straight up since you've been out, and it just keeps, the momentum is building. And would you share Kristy's dream life right now moving forward? Like, how would you be spending your day and your time if you could be doing anything you wanted to be doing?
Probably speaking. Yeah, I'm
Amen.
speaking to
See, you
people.
guys are so
I
much
know.
alike. Just want to be on stages all day.
Yeah.
No, it's not that. It's just like I did a workshop in Ashland a couple days ago. It's my first one. I did a curriculum, and I know people in Ashland, so they came to support, but also those who I never met before, and it got sold out. And on my way there, I was like, my head's like, Kristy, what are you doing? Sit down. You don't even know. Other people need to be preaching this. Those that have helped me, mentors, my sister, she's driving me because like my assistant, but she's the one that was very instrumental at helping me with boundaries, with family, things like that. I'm like, but your head says that, but my heart is louder to be like, just keep going. And the response was so great. So great. And it's just that journey that those have never been in prison, in a physical prison, are still in their mind. So I have a valuable lesson to teach, I think, because my contrast was so sharp. Prison, kicked out for being inauthentic, and someone who had a lot. And so how do you get from way down here to here? But if you're just right here, if you're just like not really in a happy job, or you have things to work on, but it's not horrible like prison, so you can kind of manage. I heard on one of your podcasts they say good is the enemy of great or something. Yeah. So if it's horrible, you have more of a effort, more of a reason to get to maybe good, and then you end up going great. So I think speaking, and I have another book that I'm starting to write. I don't even know if I told you.
Book?
Yeah, this is called Perfectly Flawed. And
Should she hold it? Can she hold it to a camera?
Oh, is that a can? Oh, that one. Perfectly Flawed. And so I wrote, like, when you had said that you wanted to know more, I wrote a full book, like 80,000 word book. But the agent liked it. They said I needed more followers and emails, subscribers, and all that. So in order to get a book, I just self-published this, and I took excerpts and I edited it down, like tiny, edited down. So I have 33 short chapters about this, the life that I just kind of talked about. And at the end of every chapter, asking myself and asking the reader questions about their life so that they can delve into, reasons why they do the things they do, or why they think, the way that they think.
When my husband and I read that book, we would read it, and then I would tell him all the rest of the details because they are such short. I'm like, well, let me tell you more about the story. And it was fascinating for him to hear that, and he gets to meet you tomorrow.
Yeah,
so I'm very excited. But will you share your experience when you read the book? Because it's not like a normal book.
Oh yeah. No, I'm still doing it.
And from a guy's perspective, I like that. Most men say that they realize that they need to love themselves more.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not through it. It shook me. I mean, it definitely, there's just things we don't often think about. You just kind of go through life, and whether it's an off switch or whether it's, for anybody, you just don't think about what made you who you are, why those things hurt or helped you, what you can do with those. I've dealt with a lot just through therapy. I have therapy this afternoon, but I've dealt with a lot through therapy of just like, okay, well, why is that? Like, well, then of course I'm that way because of that. So then what do I do to deal with that? And so a lot of your going back to your story and knowing what I knew about you when I started reading it, it's like, oh yeah, like, of course that might lead to that. That doesn't make you a different, that doesn't make you bad. It means that the results of this are this. And then how do I change that? Like, what do I do with that? And how do I think through that? And I love when you said, when you got clean and you got to just think, you were like, oh, I get to choose, what I'm going to do. And I get the power to do that. But the less you think about it and the less you focus on it, the more you push things to the side, the more you go down that same road you've been on.
Just the automatic.
Right.
Yeah. The
And I mean,
automatic part.
it's been amazing, not just the book, but in therapy, going through and going, I have a lot more power than I thought.
We have so much power. And I think that's why the trajectory of what's going on in my life, and also with like you saying yes, I love saying yes to things I have like no idea.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, let's, and I'll everyone always jokes to say, because I'm always like, I don't know, I'll call somebody like for help.
You both do that. You throw things out. Does anybody want to go to this? Or does anybody want to do this? And then people respond to you, and now you have a new friend and you went to a new thing.
Yeah.
You both,
Yeah.
you both do
Or
that.
even if I don't know what to do, but they want me to do something, I'm like, I don't know, I'll call someone to see if they can tell me how to do this, because I don't know. It's kind of fun to do that. But when I never was super solid into who I was without anybody. So when you're in a prison and you don't have anybody to please, no family, no husband, no children, it's just you. And so you can see the kind of power that you have amongst tons of pain and cries, like cry, man. Ooh, I used to cry and run around that track constantly, like, and then to get kicked out and do another year, it's like, oh boy. So then you think, man, I must be a terrible person. I remember thinking that I must be terrible.
That was my big awakening this last year was, who do I allow to tell me who I am? And so you had this woman say, you're probably a bad mom. You're probably, you would be a bad mom.
You would be.
You are probably a bad sister. You are.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's not the person who gets to tell you who you are. But in the moment, for me, I let people tell me who I am. And I had this, this big awakening of like, gosh, well, of course they would think I was that way because that was their experience with me. And so it doesn't mean this is who I am. It means we had a negative conversation that led them to believe I was something that I'm really not. And so it's allowed me that power of going, okay, who knows me really, really well? Because they probably know who I am. And others might let a certain, something they don't like, all of a sudden, well, then it's always this way or whatever. And people do that. They're like, well, you're just this way and that's who you are. And I think that's where people get trapped in repeating behaviors.
Yep.
Because it's like, well, I'm just being who you think I'm going to be. And so I'm going to meet your expectations. So you think I'm mean, I'm going to be mean.
And they don't even know that that's what they're doing.
Right.
But the great thing is, and I'll go back to what Allison was saying, that you get to decide that on your own. So you get to go inward to say, who are you? Like every morning, I still write in the morning, every morning to be like, okay, like, good morning, Kristy. How are you doing? Did you stay up too late last night? Like in a real light, fun way. Like, how are you? Or, I moved to a new town in Louisiana. I didn't know anybody. So I had to check in with myself. It's easy to get caught up in all the crazy and wild fun there too, but I also want to be solid in who I am. So it's a constant checking in. How are you doing? Is this what we want to be doing? So that's power. That's power. So you don't have to worry about what anyone else says because you know who you are.
That's the power of journaling. I mean, it's you are talking to yourself. I'm funny with myself. Oh my gosh. I make fun of myself
Same
sometimes.
here.
And it's like,
me too.
Yeah, it's like, wow, this is fun. You haven't journaled in 3 weeks. That's the last date on this one. What are you thinking? But that's all right. Let's get back into it. And so
exactly.
Love yourself. Don't be hard on yourself.
Yeah, but it's just for me. And that's where the thinking goes. And that's where okay, well, who am I? Taking all those things out. Like what do I see in myself? I'm doing some core work right now on, okay, what's my core? Like my core obviously isn't the things I've done or the things I've said my core is like, there's a core of me and the core is good.
Like your values?
Yeah, just finding out like, who am I? Like for example, I love Guatemala so much, right? But my going to Guatemala and helping, that's a symptom, or that's going to tell you something about my core. But my core is I love humans and I want to help humans. And so if I can identify with that, then my identity becomes those things that have created these things, right?
That's great.
And so doing that work, then I'm not rating myself based on whether or not the market's good or the market's bad, or whether the industry that we're in has tanked. And if I don't know my core, I might go, well, I'm just an idiot that I didn't see this coming, or that I made these bad decisions. Well, your decisions aren't your core. They come from your core, but like, what is it
I like
here?
that. I'll have to write on that a little
I'm
bit.
working on it.
Yeah, I like that. And then plus, if you're solid in who you are, then you can, I say this, I know Allison says like my churro story, but it's kind of like, if you're in a life trajectory, it's like, I wonder what's going to happen. Like, I kind of have a good idea about what's going to be like the next 2 weeks. But after that, I
Uh-huh.
mean, who knows? I'm here in Allison's here in Washington. Now I live in New Orleans. It's so different. But it's like, I always feel like when you're super solid and that doesn't mean you just love everything about yourself, but you, like you said, your core, then you're open to where the universe is going to take you. So it's like, okay, I feel like I'm on a roller coaster. Like, okay, let's go. Woo. Let's see what's, see where it's going to go. Cause if I put my head too much into it, then I'll probably shortchange myself.
What's the churro story?
Oh, we were just chatting on Marco Polo, and she was just what you just said. There just happened to be a churro involved.
Yeah, like I feel like
gotcha.
I feel like I live in an amusement park, and I'm on a great ride and eating churros, going, woo, I wonder where life's gonna take me. And what a gift to be able to do that.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. So you are available for speaking. You are available for workshops. You have your book that we can find
there will be another
you can
book.
find on Amazon called Perfectly Flawed.
And there will be more to come.
Yes.
The podcast is going to light back up.
The Freedom Exchange is on pause, but we're trying to figure out how to make that happen again.
Right. This is a great place here.
I know. I told her this
so
podcast
great.
room. She can use the podcast room.
Wow.
And then will you share, before we wrap up here, will you share what's going on tomorrow if anybody local wants to come see you?
Oh, yeah. So tomorrow I'm going to be at Up Books in Portland on Stark Street.
Up
Books.
Okay.
Yeah. And we're doing a book reading, book signing, and I'm partnering with Deb Arthur, who works at Portland State that teaches college inside prison. And so we're going to talk about Pell Grants and Unlock Higher Ed and all of that there. Yeah.
So the Freedom Exchange is live. So when I just said that to you, I was like, this isn't going to be released. So until after.
Yeah.
So she's doing that tomorrow. That's exciting.
Yeah.
We have a final question, and you
I've got
should
one
recognize
question for
it.
you.
Oh, shoot.
We end all of our podcasts with this question, and I'm really fascinated to see your answer. So if you were to go back to 11-year-old Kristy and say anything, you give one piece of advice, one thing, piece of wisdom based on all the things you've been through, what would the one thing you would say to that 11-year-old girl?
I would say it's okay if people don't understand you. You have a purpose that is not going to be successful if you keep taking pills that you don't need.
Good stuff.
There you go.
Thank you so much. I love that you were in town for this moment. We talked in New Orleans. I'm like, next time you're in town.
Yeah, that's great.
And I'm just happy that I was in
Jennifer
town.
Flowers Club.
Oh, that was amazing. Oh my gosh. I got
fun.
the tour. It was awesome.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
Thank you so
awesome.
much.
Yeah,
I love
super
you, friend. I'm
special.
so
Love
glad
you
you're
too.
here.
Yeah, thank you. This is great.